Okay, so it is Saturday and it is time for our weekly progress webinar. And let me just quickly update or explain what this is for those who participate in the first time. So as you know, we are experimenting with XCulture Kids, so with younger participants. And unlike university students who have university courses, lectures, and meet on a regular basis with their professor in class and have opportunities to discuss their experiences, ask questions, receive guidance from their professors. The kids in most cases don't have that luxury. So in most cases, they are enrolled individually by parents. And so they don't have regular training. They come in many cases much less prepared, and they do not have regular opportunities to meet with the professor or other participants to exchange ideas and get guidance that way. And so for them, we've been organizing weekly webinars, kind of roundtable webinars, where we usually just exchange some experiences and they ask questions and we would answer them. But one thing that we also try to do is to invite some guest speakers and also talk about some, I don't want to call it a lecture, more have like a little mini seminar on topics related to culture, to business, to international business, and things like that. And so today is one of those meetings, and as an experiment, I actually sent an invitation to a few students from the university track to see if they would express interest, as well as to later see if they found this sort of meetings useful. For them, it will be both kind of a mini webinar or seminar, but also in addition, if they have any administrative questions, we can treat it as, let's call it office hours. So if they need to meet with the professor and talk to us and ask about the project, it would be an opportunity to do this. And so from what I see, we have at least apparently some students here. And so let's see who else shows up in the coming minutes. And then there are some kids that I recognize. And then we have two very special guests. We have two professors here. We have Justin Kramer. He's at the University of Wisconsin at La Crosse. Professor Kramer has been in XCulture for many years, not only as a professor, but also he plays a very important role on the research team. So he's basically our data manager slash analyst slash statistician. So he has done a lot of work when it comes to preparing and processing the data, but also he's one of the co-authors on a number of papers that have been written or have been written based on the XCulture data. So if anyone needs help with mathematics or statistics or data management, Professor Kramer would be a very good contact. And then we also have Professor Cristina Robledo Ardila. She's at EIT University in Medellin, Colombia. So that's, in those who don't know, so Colombia in Latin America. And same thing, so she has been with us for many, many years, probably at least 5, maybe even 6, 7, I don't even know how many, but from some early stages. And so her students have participated in XCulture for many years. But at the same time, Christina's has been involved in XCulture in many other capacities. So I visited that school a couple of times. So Christina also is involved in some research efforts and obviously has a lot of experience with culture as well. And so we would like to start today with a little discussion about culture, not XCulture, but culture as a phenomenon. And then spend maybe a little time on that. And then our guest speakers are welcome to stay longer, but if they would like to leave at that time, it's perfectly fine. And then we'll have hopefully a few minutes to talk about the technical and administrative side of the project in case you have any questions. And so I would like to start this discussion with a question, and then let's see what the kids have to say, and then we will hear our professors to say some more on the topic. And so the question is very simple. So what is culture? Can anyone tell me what culture is? How would you define culture? Anyone? So we have a lot of smart kids here. Anyone knows what culture is? Can you tell us, guys? Don't be shy. Cyrene, Ojasvin, Alexandra, so nice to see you guys. Yevgeny, so who would tell us what culture is? Now, Ojasvin and Harsh, I still see you even though you switched your camera off. Anyone? Anyone? Come on, guys, don't be shy. It's a very simple question. What is culture? All right, I'll start pointing fingers. Cyrene, you seem to be at least right in the middle on my screen. So what is culture to you? How would you define culture? How would you explain what culture is? If an alien landed on Earth and asked, what they think culture? So how would you explain it?
Culture is people live like different countries, so they have different cultures, like the way they speak, the way they meet and greet.
Okay, so that's the way they speak and the way they interact with one another. Okay, so okay, very good. Cyrene gets a gold star. I don't have a gold star, so she gets a package of virtual chocolates. Very good. So how about the other guys? Oh, Justin, Harsh, Yevgeny, Alexandra, would you guys know something about culture? How would you define it?
Can I?
Yes, yes, go ahead, please.
Basically, culture is something like the way in the difference in the lifestyle and traditions and arts of different countries and regions.
Okay, okay, that's a very good answer. Yeah, yeah, okay, nice. All right, well, let us move to our professors and see what they have to say about this topic. Justin, Christina, how would you describe or define culture?
Well, hi everybody. I think the guys have mentioned pretty much things that we can see. Right. And one thing that is very important when we talk about culture or try to understand somebody else's culture is to try to think about those things we cannot see that are under the surface, and that you need to think a little bit deeper and maybe analyze not only like verbal language and things like that, but also what is underneath the surface, to try to see what they think, what they believe, and why they behave the way they do it.
Okay, that's, yeah, very comprehensive. Justin, do you have anything else to add?
I might say absolutely. So things I wouldn't necessarily use the word see, but sense. So taste, hear, feel. I don't know. There's 7 senses. I haven't been in elementary school for a long time, but whatever the senses are. But also things inside, absolutely. But someone mentioned nation. I think nation is one way of grouping, but there's different ways of grouping as well. So you can have province, you can have state, maybe municipality, or you can have groups of people crossing all of those things. So I don't know, like the pop culture. So you can have people from around the world in different nations belonging to the same group.
Right. Can be also a culture of an organization or a culture of a small company, for example. I would like to share with you quickly here a little, just a second. I have a little slide that also illustrates the one that I use when I teach my lectures. So let me just see if it will work. And if it will, okay. So if you can see my slides here, I will say only a couple of things about culture. One, people have noticed that people from different countries have different cultures. And so here is a copy from a manuscript from literally hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And somebody was trying to describe the cultures of a Dutchman, Englishman, Frenchman, and Norwegian. And I have no idea if the descriptions are still accurate, but the point is that differences among people from different, or peoples, I guess, from different countries had been observed a long, long time ago. And so another interesting experiment I did a search for the word culture on Google a long time ago. And I was surprised that there are so many websites that use the word culture. At that time, it was in 2015, so by now it may be even more. It was 6.3 billion websites. In fact, many more than, for example, if you search for some other popular terms. And so there was this guy, Geert Hofstede, who was talking about culture as an onion. Just like Professor Christina Rodlega said, culture is more than just what meets the eye, so it has layers. And in fact, my favorite example here would be this one. So people say that culture is like an iceberg. So what the kids mentioned was clothing styles, languages, protocols, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. Most of the iceberg is kind of under the water. So most of the things about culture often you don't see. That's what people think, how people approach things, how people perceive things, values, and things like that. And my last slide, and that's my favorite one. So when we talk about culture, I personally actually like the analogy of a vegetable. So what that means is that culture is like a vegetable in a sense that you can tell where the person is from by a quick look at the person. So for example, you see someone dressed a certain way and you know, oh, this person must be from, I don't know, Middle East or from Japan or maybe from the United States. So you can tell the culture right away by its leaves or by foliage. But in order to fully understand what a culture is and how it sort of tastes, you have to dig deeper and taste it. And so that will allow you to truly understand what the culture is. So anyway, can anyone describe some cultural differences that you've observed in your life? I don't know, differences, let's say the United States versus India versus Ukraine versus Canada versus Colombia. So let's see who will give us a good observation of cultural differences. And then maybe we will ask our professors to give us some sort of a framework to think about how those cultures can differ. So anyone? Sarine, everybody is hiding behind the switched off camera, so I'll ask you again. So what countries have you visited, and what kind of differences did you notice? You need to unmute your microphone. We don't hear you.
The biggest difference is language, maybe.
So what countries have you visited before?
I visited Kingdom Saudi Arabia and Malaysia.
Okay. So what are the differences among those countries that you noticed?
There's a big difference. So here they have different clothes, like different clothing styles.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big difference in the language.
Okay.
They treat each other.
Can you describe how they treat each other differently?
Okay, in Malaysia, some were like a little rude.
Okay. And in Saudi Arabia, not like that?
And no.
Okay, all right. How about other guys? Evgeny, Ojasvin, Harsh, Aum I see here. So have you guys observed any cultural differences? Aum, if you want to talk, you need to unmute your microphone. It would be nice if you shared your thoughts with us.
Yeah, in India, people like when you drive a car, like in US, it's based on miles, and in India it's kilometer. So that's one difference. And also, if you talk to the local people in India, they usually talk in Hindi or the state languages.
So the language is different. Yeah, that's good. Good. Yeah. Anyone else? Guys. Yeah, Justin, go ahead.
I visited only one country, Dubai, and I think that the differences are there's some similarities, but I think after doing X culture for 1 year, that a country has many superstitious people.
Superstition, that's an interesting one.
Like they believe like in ghosts and God more, and we also have a very variety of rich culture. And in like a visitor in Dubai, they also have kind of rich culture, and I found many similarities between us and them. Like our traditional clothes are made up of cotton, and some of their traditional clothes are also made of cotton.
Interesting. And you participated in X Culture before, so what kind of cultural differences did you notice on your team
We had basically three people from different countries, basically three people from different religions, and two of them were basically of the same culture. Like two of them were from Ukraine,
Uh-huh.
basically, and Yevgeny.
So did you notice any differences between Ukrainian culture and Indian culture?
Yeah, I found many differences between
Like what?
them and us. Like accent
Uh-huh.
and lifestyle.
Uh-huh. Okay, all right. Okay, very good. So let's ask our professors for other ways to think about cultural differences in some systematic way. Or how would you analyze cultural differences or you know?
I think when you are traveling or working with other culture, even if it is online, that relationship takes place, like getting to know a little bit about that culture is very important. And the things you may read online or hear from other people will give you an interesting insight. But you can never count completely on that to relate to that person in the future.
Right, right.
There are many things that become stereotypes, and then you will be judging that person on that culture based on somebody else's perception or a blog or a website. So it is very interesting to read ahead, to get to know things a little bit ahead, but you always need to count also on your own judgment, on your own ability to perceive and to read the situation and the person in order to understand and to be able to adapt your behavior and your communication style and be able to relate successfully to that person or to that culture.
Right. Yeah. That's a very good point. Justin, do you have anything else to add?
Only that one of my favorite differences, and people might chuckle when I say this, is what we eat. Right? I see the Ukrainian and the Colombian, and someone mentioned Malaysia and Britain. All these people, especially in Asia. So I've spent a lot of time in different Asian countries. That seems to be the pinnacle. That seems to be a very important time to connect and build relationships, always over eating. So I think if you really understand what people eat, when they eat, why they eat, then you really begin to understand the relationships.
Right. That's an interesting observation. Yeah, that's a good one. I just shared with everybody a link in the chat room. So here is one way to think about cultural differences. Let me show you that website so you know what I mean here. So when they talk about culture as the visible things like language, like food, like art, like clothing, so those are relatively easy to think about because we always see them and we always sort of think about them. But there is also something that is called cultural values, and so those are much more difficult to understand. And so there was this man, Gert Hofstede. He was from the Netherlands, and he's like 94 years old now, or 95 even. But he is alive and even sometimes organizes seminars. And so he was one of the first people who said, well, maybe we should think about culture in terms of different values. And so he came up with this model that analyzes culture on different dimensions. And let me give you here a few examples. For example, let's take a look at Indian culture. So he came up with those originally 5 dimensions and then eventually expanded the model to 6 dimensions. But he said there are dimensions like, for example, power distance. He says that, if you see my screen, so he says that in some cultures, people of power, so kind of bosses, supervisors, are treated with much more kind of reverence and respect than in other cultures. And so India, so the maximum score could be 100. As you can see, India has scores 77 on power distance. So for example, if we compare that, let's say, to Canada, so that Justin is from, so let's see how that would compare. So Canada, as you see, is relatively low on power distance. So in Canada, when people look at a supervisor, so they still give their supervisor more respect, more, I don't know, bigger office. But Canada scores much lower on power distance than, for example, India. Then there is something that is called individualism, collectivism. Again, in some cultures, people care a lot about their family and their kind of, close circle of friends. And in others, people are a little bit more individualistic. So they sort of care a little bit more about themselves. And so again, according to his research, for example, Canada is more individualist, whereas India is more collectivist. You had a question, guys?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
What is power distance?
So power distance, that's the difference in sort of respect and status ascribed to people who are managers, supervisors, maybe, people in power. So for example, in the United States, just to give you an example, people call their supervisors, their bosses, usually by first name, and they're very informal with them. So the boss may still have a somewhat bigger office and maybe a little bit more money, but in most cases, people would not treat the supervisor with too much respect. In a sense, they would feel comfortable maybe arguing with the manager, maybe asking questions, maybe even, disagreeing with the manager. Whereas in cultures that are high on power distance, usually the manager has much more power, and usually people would be uncomfortable calling that person, by first name. They would say Mr. Such and Such instead of Hey John. And so the boss would usually have a much bigger office and a much bigger car. And in many cases would be treated, as I said, very differently. So then you have this masculinity, femininity. So in some cultures, people are very, let's call it aggressive, achievement-oriented. They want to sort of always win. And in other cultures, people care much more about relationships. And so if this graph is right, so Canada and the United States, and India score roughly the same, roughly in the middle on masculinity. Uncertainty avoidance, so that's how much people tolerate risk. If people are comfortable with no clear instructions and a lot of sort of autonomy. So Canada scores a little higher, so they're a little bit more comfortable with risk. But India slightly less, but very close. Then long-term orientation. So here, as you see, India scores higher than Canada. So in Canada, people prefer to get some quick benefits. So they plan only for a kind of shorter period of time. And in India, apparently people think a little bit in longer term. So they maybe save a little bit more. So they think about future a little bit more. And so this indulgence is the last one. So how much people want to have fun today. So again, Canadians apparently are very high on indulgence, on receiving pleasure, whereas Indians are much more restrained, apparently, according to this study. So they would be willing to perhaps take some cuts or save a little bit and not engage in some fun activities in hope perhaps that maybe tomorrow they will have a little bit more resources to have that sort of fun. And so I would like to maybe compare a couple more countries. So let's keep India here. Let's take USA. So United States we have here, and let's take, for example, Ukraine. And so I'm not sure if we have any. Do we have any other countries here? And Colombia. So let's see what we have here. So when it comes to power distance, Ukraine is very, very high on power distance. In fact, the highest, right? And the United States is relatively low on power distance. So according to this study, in Ukraine, people are, bosses are really, really high on power, and in the United States, not so much. And then, yes.
In India, I've realized with people of higher rank, you usually call them sir.
Right. Exactly. You call them sir, and maybe you don't show too much disagreement with them if that's your manager, right? Yeah. So when it comes to individualism, so again, according to this study, America is the most individualist country, and Colombia and Ukraine are more collectivist, and India is sort of slightly in the middle. Not sure how accurate those numbers are, but that's what the study showed. Masculinity, all are roughly the same. Ukrainians are a little bit more feminine in the sense that they're more, kind of peace-oriented and relationship-oriented. So uncertainty avoidance. So it seems like India is the most comfortable, is the least comfortable country with uncertainty. So people want clear rules, clear guidance. So they would like to know how to do things and, have to have clear explanation. Actually, the United States is sorry. India and the United States are not really interested in that, so they're fine with some uncertainty. But Ukraine and Colombia here score high. Again, not sure how true it is, but that's what the study shows. In terms of long-term orientation, it seems like Colombia thinks more about today, United States thinks more about today, and India and Ukraine think much more in the future, although also only like at the roughly in the middle. And indulgence, Colombians really love fun. So apparently, according to the study, Colombians really would like to have some, so they probably like good food and good company and good, music. So, and Americans apparently too, but Indians and Ukrainians are fine, maybe, I don't know, focusing more on things that maybe matter more, but may not be so fun. So I'm not sure how accurate those numbers are in comparisons, but that's what it is.
May I jump in and just
Yes,
add
please,
one
please.
point? So as was stated earlier, and it was a great insight, these are averages or means of a different nation. And so if you imagine all the people in India, there's close to 1 billion of them. I'm sure you're going to have some people who are high, some people who are low on any given, in this case, value. And so this is the average among that group. So as was stated, when you interact with people from, in this case, a country, you have to understand that this person may not be exactly what this study says, but is somewhere in the group, right? There's a distribution.
Yeah, in fact, that was going to be my next question. Yes, that is absolutely correct. In fact, it's possible that there is no single person in the entire country who scores exactly at this level, right? You can have someone who is much lower, someone who is much higher, and that's what you get as an average. And so it's very dangerous to think about cultures and countries as the same thing. We called it the passport approach. Just because, for example, we know that, let's say, Justin Raj is from India, it doesn't really mean that this number here, which one, the purple one, represents his values. India, Canada, the United States, Colombia, even Ukraine are very diverse countries, and you will find very different subgroups, ethnicities, religions, work, professional communities, and they may be very, very different on those cultures, depending on whom you look at. So definitely, so you can still think about culture in these terms, like individualism, power, distance, masculinity, but it's very dangerous to assume that everybody, for example, from Ukraine or Canada or the United States will be what this study shows they would be. So there may be some sort of some value in having that average, but yes, it would be very dangerous to assume that everybody is the same. Yeah. Any other comments on that? So there have been a lot of ways to measure culture, and so the question I have for you and the professors, so how would you measure culture? So how do you think those bars from Gerst Hofstede study, where do you think they came from? How would you do it? Like, how do you think they came up with those numbers? If we hired you to measure and describe cultures of your teams, how would you express it in numbers? Anyone? Yes. Oh, Bakhtash. Oh, good to see you. I was wondering where you were.
I'm really sorry to be late.
Yes, who don't know, so Bakhtash is in Afghanistan. So sorry I didn't add your country to that list, but we will do a comparison later. Please go ahead, Bakhtash.
I think surveying the people is a very good option to find those values.
That's a big word. Can you explain that?
Yes.
What do you mean by the word survey? That's a very, you are absolutely correct. Can you explain it to those who may not know what that means?
Survey, well, with different ways, is how we, how we get the information from people. We ask them questions, and with different ways and strategies, we get the information from people. For example, all the things that we just saw in the chart, we ask questions about those things from people, from a certain group of people, maybe.
Very good, exactly. So if you had to measure, for example, let's say individualism, collectivism, what kind of questions would you ask?
Maybe a question about their future. Some people mostly think about themselves, and they always say, I want to go to this place, visit this place, and have such a job. And some other people say, oh, I want to make my parents happy, I want to buy them a house, and some other.
Yeah, that's a very good example. Very good example. Yeah. So, professors, would you maybe share with us a little bit more about how cultures are measured?
Well, you usually start by asking individuals. That's right. That is the main source, because a group has no thinking on its own. The thinking of the group would be the result of the individuals, not as simply adding what they say. You need to go beyond that and understand how those things get together, how those ideas combine, because they will be agreements and disagreements amongst the group. So that's very important. And something that you also need to take into account, because as he said, surveys are a very powerful way of collecting data and getting meaningful results, is the fact that there is a very dangerous point when you start to generalizing your findings. So you need to be careful with the types of questions. I think the examples we just heard would be very interesting, but you also need to be careful about the way you put those findings together in order to get meaningful information and meaningful results that are actually going to be useful for you in the future.
Very good. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah. Justin, do you have anything to add about that?
I would say it's what elements are of interest to you. So if you want to, let's say that iceberg we talked about, if you want to understand the things below, maybe survey is the best you can do. You can do a question about the self. You might also do questions about other people that you think are in your team, right, or in your group. And so an expectation of people. But if you're going at the top of the iceberg, you could also ask those questions, I guess, but maybe more directly, you could observe them, you could taste them, you could touch them, you could see them, you could feel them. And so those are different ways of measuring as well.
Yeah, that's a very good one. I'll give you a couple of examples from the same study that we just looked at in terms of the questions, and maybe I will even ask you to answer those questions, and let's see how you would answer it. For example, when they measured individualism, collectivism, they had a 5-point scale. I'm not sure if you see here my picture. So they had a 5-point scale, and they said on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being disagree, 3 being neutral, and 5 being agree, how would you answer the following question? And so for individualism, collectivism, it was, for example, a question, how important it is for you to live close to your family. So when you have a job or go to school, how important it is for you to be close to your family. So how would you answer that question on a 5-point scale? So for example, I don't know, Baktash, how important is it for you to live close to your family?
4.
4, okay. Anyone else? Cyrene, Aum, Yevgeny, what numbers would you give? How important would it be for you to be close to your family?
I think it's a 4 too.
Can you say it again, sorry?
Yeah, for me it's a 4.
It's a 4, okay. Anyone else?
For me, it's a 4.
4, okay, yeah. So yeah, I guess I would choose probably more like 3 or even 2. I mean, I'd like to say that it's also 4, but given that I've always been far from my family, turns out it's probably not as important. At least my behavior does not support that claim. But yeah, so what they would do, they would ask a lot of people that question, and then they would take an average. And so using that average for the country, they would say, okay, that's, And then I'll give you one more question just as an example from power distance, since there were some questions. So the question reads, when you disagree with your manager, would it be appropriate for you to show that disagreement? So do you think when you disagree with your teacher or with your manager, would you show your disagreement openly or not? So how would you answer that question?
In my country, it's a 5. In yours.
So you would say agree, you would show the disagreement?
Yeah.
Okay.
You would explain politely.
Yeah, you would show 3, okay. Another question for power distance, actually, I like that a little bit more. Should manager consult their employees when making a decision? So when a manager is making a decision, should the manager be expected to consult the employees? Like, for example, if a teacher wants to make a decision about the class, should the teacher consult the students? So what would you say? 5, I see a 5. Anyone else? Show me the number. 5. So, okay, so yeah. So we have some 1s and some 3s and some 5s. So see, people have a disagreement. It seems like a very simple question, but we have some big disagreements. Yeah. All right. Professors, do you have anything else to say about culture? Kids, any other observations and comments about culture before we go to the administrative stuff? All right. Okay. Well, let's wrap this topic. Hopefully you learned something new about culture. Thank you so much, Justin and Christina. So thank you for spending the time with us. We wanted to talk a little bit about the administrative stuff, and you're most welcome to stay. But
I will go now, but thank you for the invitation. It was very interesting to participate, and if anybody has any questions about Colombian culture in the future, you are welcome to ask.
Can you maybe give us a very quick, like a 1-minute description of Colombian culture, just so we know?
Maybe can you go back to the chart,
yes.
the comparison?
Let me. So do you still have, yeah, that's the one. So can you see it?
Yeah. Okay. So maybe when it comes to power distance, as we were discussing before, there is high power distance in Colombia. I would say that's accurate. We need to call doctor, señor, patron, like different names, people who is above you in the hierarchy, like your boss and things like that. So I would say that's right. You also need to show respect. You do not show your disagreements too openly. Not in public, not in a big group of people. Maybe if you need to talk to your boss about a disagreement, you need to do it in private and be very polite and careful about it. Regarding individualism and collectivism, we are a highly collectivist country. Colombians do value being part of a group, and once you are an in-group, like you become part of it, you will enjoy the support of that group you are a member of. Like the group will support you, and every member will seek the welfare and put the group above each individual's interests or objectives. Regarding masculinity, femininity, I would say that's a good point also. We are driven to achieve results and success. As you know, Colombia is not a wealthy country, so Colombians are decided to get or to achieve what they want. They set goals, they pursue them, and they work very hard. Like we are usually known to be like really hardworking people. We start working very early in the mornings and would work non-stop for what we want.
It looks like Colombia scores the highest on both masculinity and indulgence. So you work hard and you play hard, right?
Yes, we live life to the top. We really enjoy everything we do. And family plays a big role. Even if we are hard workers, we really stick to family because that's one of our groups. Like a big, like the base of that collectivism would be family above all. We are very we really try to avoid uncertainty. In Colombia, you will find so many laws and rules. We have a very, very long constitution, one of the longest in the world. We have rules for everything. We have decrees, resolutions, and norms, and we try to write everything down. Everything is very extensive.
Interesting. In the United States, the Constitution is only a few pages long, right?
It is.
To think about it.
Not that it's easy to enforce all those laws and norms. That's a different story. But we do try to have everything in writing. So you will find a an interesting fact there. Everything is in writing the way it should be, but when you go and see how it works, they don't always match. Put it that way. Regarding long-term orientation, we are very short-term oriented. Maybe that has to do a lot with the history of the country and the development of our country in terms of economics and things like that. Let me put an example. In the capital, there is an international airport, which was remodeled 2 years ago. But it took us like 10 years to approve the plans to remodel the airport. And once it was finished, it is no longer enough for the amount of passengers and flights we need to accommodate, because we really had a short-term view on the remodeling plan. So we are not long-term oriented. The airport, so now we have the airport we needed 10 years ago. We had a very short view on.
Well, the country is developing really fast, so I guess nobody could have predicted that. But I hear you. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, and regarding indulgence, I think Buzz is right. We really enjoy everything we do. Like our groups or our families are a very important part of our lives. We try to enjoy. If you go and see like those rankings relating to the happiest people in the world, you will find Colombia on the top.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is not like a map you can use for every interaction with a Colombian or a Ukrainian or an Indian, but it is a good start. It is an interesting start for you to get to know like different cultures.
Yeah. Well, I can say that Colombian food, music, coffee, parties are probably the most fun.
Right here.
There you go. Justin, can you maybe tell just quickly a little bit about the cultures you're associated with? So those who don't know, Professor Kramer is Canadian. He has lived in the United States for a long time, but also has extensive experience in Asia. So I'm not sure if you want to describe one of those cultures perhaps as an example.
I'm trying to think which one in Asia would be the most interesting. Someone mentioned Malaysia already, so I'll leave that one. Maybe we have a representative.
Can you maybe explain or describe American culture? I mean, you've lived in it enough, but you also have good points of reference, and we have so many participants from the United States. So for all of those who are outside the United States, if they needed to understand Americans, what are Americans like?
Just stay civil. I have to watch what I say sometimes.
Right.
So I think as the Hofstede graph showed, and in this case I would very much agree, the individualism is very, are you okay? I think the individualism is very clear here. Everyone tends to, I'm not saying they're always mean or even selfish, but they tend to focus on themselves. And what is inside their personal values, their personal goals. And sometimes those personal values are generous, so they donate a lot and they give a lot and they're philanthropic. But other times personal values and goals are not so beneficial to others. So you really, in here I find you really have to understand the individual to really get a sense of how to appropriately interact with that person and what to expect. So even though it's in that same value as collectivism, that individual side of that continuum, if you will, presents a whole distribution in and of itself, because individuals, of course, are different. And so to me, that one is sometimes quite tricky. What other ones? Power distance, I would say it's very clear. It should be quite low. Here, I have a supervisor, for instance, and we call him by his first name, William. It's not doctor or chair, or it's just, hey, Will. Sometimes people just, hey, W, right? And we're very informal. And he seeks our guidance. And so I think that one is relatively low, and that one's clear.
Yeah, the professors, when they address you, do they say Professor Kramer? Do they say Justin? How do they normally address you?
some students actually begin the interaction with me with Dr. Kramer, and I say, no, it's okay, just call me Justin. And if you interact with me via email, I actually sign most of my emails JK, Justin Kramer. So some of my students just call me JK, right? So it's quite informal, and it's quite, I guess status here is not as important, and deference is not as important as in other groups.
Yeah.
Uncertainty avoidance is a tricky one, because I think you can see United States as being somewhat in the middle here, and I would agree with that assessment too, though I have some other concerns with Hofstede's framework. But because I think people understand that here, their thought is that in order to develop and grow, you need to take risks and do new things, but at the same time, you have to watch and be careful of what those new things are that you're doing. So they understand that innovation is important, but they also understand that sometimes it's risky. So I think that one's pretty much bang on. Long-term orientation, I would definitely agree. Short-term is probably king. And you know, the tax, even an example of tax reductions and so forth. As soon as you get money in your pocket, somehow it doesn't stay in your pocket. You have to spend it on.
Sometimes you even borrow it. So apparently Americans put so much, like use loans and credit cards to buy so much. So sometimes for fun today, who cares about the interest tomorrow?
And it was interesting that you said about the connection between masculinity and indulgence. I always see somewhat of a connection between long-term and indulgence, right? Because let's say in the United States, quite low, and so very short-term, but quite high in indulgence. So I spend now because I want to have fun and do good things, right? So it's and indulgence. It's very difficult for me to say. I don't often use this one. I don't understand it as well as the others. And I probably live in a smaller town where people don't have enough money or as much money to be indulgent. But you can see in some big metropolitan centers, fancy cars and expensive coats and boots and things.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for those insights. Truly appreciate it. So let's conclude this webinar on culture, and then we have a few more minutes to discuss some administrative issues. So professors, thank you so much for being with us. As I said, you are welcome to stay if you would like to, or if you need to run. I know your time is valuable, so thank you so much. So for everybody else, bye, thank you. Say everybody, say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So this week, you have to work on the team charter, right? So not sure if you had a chance to write yours. We will not grade it, not mark it, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but you need to write something about how your team will operate. And so the main goal here is to kind of prompt you to think as a team how you will distribute the workload, who will be doing what, will you have a leader or not in the team, so things like that. And so the question I have for you, have you had a chance to discuss it, and how is it going? Is everything fine? You still have today and tomorrow to finish it. Have you had those discussions in your team? Or Jasmine, or Harsh, go ahead.
We decided to have a meeting today. And we also emailed our teammates when we started the meeting, but no one came except Adway. But he had to run for some reason, so he went. Tuitions. So he went and no one came.
So have you been able to make a decision, the three of you?
No, he had to run early.
So here is what I suggest you do. One, as I said, it's not marked, so it doesn't have to be perfect and doesn't have to be done right now. So it's a little disappointing that nobody else came. But what you can do is you can write, even the two of you, you can write your proposal, just jot down what you have. You can probably even reuse some of the ideas from the last semester. And then maybe send an email to everybody else saying, okay, this is how we propose we do it. And if you have any suggestions, if you would like to do it differently, let us know. And so this way you become the managers in this case, take the leadership role. And I think people will agree with whatever you come up with. And I think you are the most experienced people on the team anyway. So I guess they'll probably agree with what you have to say anyway. But I think that would be the best way to do it. And so, as I said, it doesn't have to be perfect, but some discussion has to happen so that you don't have surprises next, in the future, right? So, and good for you guys that you tried to organize that meeting, and I'm so glad that at least someone is trying. So, great job.
Our group is having a meeting right after.
Okay, great. So you will have a chance to discuss. So would you recommend that your group has a leader, or would you prefer that everybody is sort of equal?
Right now we have not appointed a leader, so it's kind of like a democracy.
Yeah, so yeah. Well, even with the leader, you can perfectly have a democracy, so the team kind of coordinator can be just the person who does a little more coordination, and maybe somebody does more, I don't know, research or copy editing. So those are all perfectly viable models. Any other teams here? Bakhtash, how's your team doing?
We had a meeting yesterday. We discussed the team charter with some of our team members, and we also had some conversations in our WhatsApp group. Yes, we are discussing. Yes, one of our team members, she just created a file in Google Docs, and we are all editing the file.
Very nice. That guy, Maxim from the United States, is he participating now?
I think I should be honest.
Well,
I think he has different time zone, so it's hard for him to participate in
you're too politically correct. So from the sense of your tone, it sounds like he hasn't participated much, right?
I think he's trying now because we just got his number, and we yes, we added him to our group. Yeah. We had few conversations, and we set a date to have the meeting. I don't know what happened, but
so he missed the meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's fine. He'll definitely join the next meeting.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that update. But yeah, that's basically what you guys have to do this week, and so I trust that the other teams also are making some progress. So good to know. And so that's basically all you have to do this week. So you have to have a discussion about how your team will be organized, write it down, kind of have like a little mini team contract, if you will, and then submit it. And then next week, you will have to start thinking about your tasks. So since you are all in the children's track, you have the Dream School Challenge. And so we will have a meeting with Finnish Schools International on Monday. It's not a very good time. I think for you it will be the evening. So for most of you it will be the evening. So I suppose at that time, hopefully you will be able to join. It will be, if I remember correctly, 10 a.m. my time. So it will be basically roughly around this time, your time. So hopefully you will be back from school by that time, and hopefully you will be able to join and talk to the CEO of the company, ask questions. But as always, we will record the meeting, and I will have the recording for you later. And then I've been exchanging emails with the Experiential School of Greensboro, and so we will have the meeting also next week, but we still have not decided when. And the reason for that is we had this hurricane going through our neighborhood, already done now, but it caused some serious damage, and so the school has been canceled for a few days. It looks like most of the city will not have power, they said, until Monday or even Tuesday. And so we're now waiting for that to be resolved, and then once we have more details, we will schedule that webinar. And so it will be definitely sometime this coming week, but I'm not sure when, and so I'll let you know once you know. And so yes, we will meet those two schools and learn about them, and then I guess on your end, you should probably start describing your schools to your team members. So whatever you are working on, one of the tasks is that you have to describe the school that you go to your team, and so you can take maybe some pictures. You can maybe describe how your classes are structured, how long you are in school, what the teachers do and what the teachers are like. Maybe even, as I said, interview some of your classmates or teachers for your team. So start thinking about your schools, and since we have 4, 5, 6, even 7 people on some teams, that will give you a good perspective as to how schools can be organized. And so as you're exchanging that information, you can be paying attention to 2 things. 1, what do you like about those schools? And 2, what you don't like about those schools. So if there is something that you really like, maybe you can use that idea for your dream school design. And then if there is something you don't like about the schools that you learn about, maybe that's something you should avoid in your dream school design. So that's pretty much all I had to say. Any questions, any comments? We have about 4 minutes left. Observations? Anyone? All right, well, so thank you so much everyone for being here. And yeah, so if anything else comes up, send me an email or we'll meet again next week. All right? Thank you so much. Good comments and good questions, everyone, especially Aum and Justin Raj. And oh, Advay is here finally. Advay, how's life? We haven't seen you for a long time.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, hi Advay.
Busy with school.
Yeah, okay. Well, if you missed or the part that you missed, you can always watch the recording. So we had a nice discussion about culture. So Cyrene, very good participation today. Baktash as always. So I'm not even saying great job because you always do great job. So thank you so much, everyone. All right, well, stay, have a nice weekend, and I guess we'll see you in a week or so.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Bye-bye.
Terrace.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Hello.
Bye.
Yes. So Justin, you wanted to say something? Go ahead. Yes.
I had a question. I had to ask something from Advay.
Yes, go ahead.
Advay, will you have a meeting afterwards?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
Oh, so for your team, would you like to stay here? I can keep you here. I'll just stop recording, and then if you want to, or do you want to connect on Skype or whatever you use? What's your preference?
Do Skype.
Okay, all right. Okay, well.
I'm sorry, Mr. Terrace.
Yes.
Do you have a few minutes?
Yes, sure. So let's.
Can I ask about the symposium that's going to be in Canada?
Yes. Yep, let me just give you a quick update. So yes, the symposium will be in Canada. It will be probably the last week or third week of July. We still haven't set the exact dates, but I'll give you just a second. Let me take Stampede Canada, Calgary, 2019. I'll give you the date. So we know that it will be back to back with one huge festival that they have in Canada every year, Calgary Stampede. So the Stampede will be July 6 to 15. So that means that we will have our meeting after that. So it will be probably 15 to 20 or something like that, July. So the University of Calgary will be the host. And at some point we were not sure if it will be in Canada or Grenada, but eventually decided that it will be Canada this year and then Grenada next year. So it will be mountains and a lot of forests and kind of nice, crisp climate this summer. And then next summer it will be Grenada. So it will be all about the beaches and ocean and tropical climate. Normally, we will see how it goes, but normally since we have such a small group of kids, we will be inviting everyone who will do well. So as long as you do very well, your team is happy with you, you submit the report, you will get an invitation. Hopefully we'll be able to attend. As far as financial support, cannot promise anything at this time, but we will try to provide some travel stipends at least to some students. We will have to see how it works, how it goes, so no promise on that front at this time. As you know, Xculture is a nonprofit, so we don't really have much resources. So we do receive small payments from universities and participants like you guys, but that's barely enough to cover our operating expenses. And so we don't have our own money to offer in travel stipends, but we will definitely try to talk to the companies that participate in the competition and see if they would be willing to provide support to some of the participants. So we'll have to see how that goes. And we will also, when it comes to financial support, we always allow you to provide names of potential sponsors, like maybe your school, maybe your city mayor, maybe the company where your parents work, or other companies in the city. And what we will do is we will write very nice, strong support letter for you. So that hopefully can help you get some funding from other organizations. In the past, we know that most students who attend the symposium, they do receive some funding. And so in many cases, those support letters help them. And so in many cases, they would go to a local businessman or politicians or school officials and say, okay, I was invited to this event. I'm one of a few. It's a very good opportunity. Would you support me? Would you sponsor me? And so in many cases, they get that sort of support. So that's briefly what I have to say. Do you have any specific questions, Baktash?
And what about the visa? Well, you know, it's really hard to get a Canadian visa from Afghanistan. So.
Yeah, we will send you an invitation, so a strong invitation, and obviously again no guarantees, but hopefully it will be good enough. Again, in the past we've had, like for example, Italy. I think pretty much everybody who applied received a visa. There could have been one or two people maybe who didn't, out of a couple hundred, but it seems like most people did receive the visa. With the United States, we have another meeting in 2 weeks in Nashville, in Tennessee, here in the United States. And so this time we invited only 50 students. It's only for the university students. This time it's all about research. And to my knowledge, there were about 10 or so who did not receive the visa. And so I know that some people had difficulties. So we'll have to see, but we will definitely give you an invitation that explains in detail where you're going, why you're going, you know, what kind of support you receive from us, you know, how it works. So my hope is that with that, you should be able to get the visa.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mr. Terrace.
Mm-hmm.
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, I have another query. Like my cousin's sister just stays almost 1 or 2 blocks away from the university. So is it important to stay in the university, or can we stay somewhere else too?
Oh, you mean when you visit Calgary?
Yeah.
I'm sure we can work it out. Yes, I don't think you have to live on campus. In fact, we're still not 100% sure about the accommodations we'll have there. I think we will have some on-campus housing, but yes, if you have something nearby and you want to stay with your relatives, it's definitely perfectly fine. So as long as you can be there on campus every day, it shouldn't be a problem. And Calgary has very good public transportation, so even if it's a little further away, so you can take what they call C-train in Calgary, like Metro. It just goes above the ground, I guess, in Calgary. So, but yeah, it shouldn't be a problem at all. Mm-hmm.
Sir?
Yes?
Did Alita visit last year in the symposium?
Yes, Aelita didn't attend the symposium last time, so we had Advay was there, and Maxim was there, Sophia was there, Fernando, yeah, from Ecuador. Yeah, from Ecuador. So we had several kids. There were, I believe, a total of 5 or 6 of them. And so I believe all of them stayed, well, we had different accommodations there. So some stayed in hotels and some stayed on campus. But I think all of the kids stayed in a hotel near the campus, near where the conference was taking place. And and then the university students stayed in the dormitories on campus. So, and they actually were a little farther away from where the meetings were taking place. So it was closer to stay at a hotel at that time. So.
Mr. Terrace, have you estimated the expenses?
Yes, so I think your tickets will be at that time about 1,000, probably 500, 1,400. And then if we will go with the same registration we had last time, it covered everything. So I think it was something like 700 or something like that, or 785, something like this. So total travel, and once you're there, we covered most of the things. It would be probably somewhere around 2,500 total. And as I said, I cannot promise any funding, but we will look in the possibility of offering some travel stipends, at least to some of the best students. So we'll have to see, but at this time, hard to say. But yes, you will probably have a total price tag of about 2,500, and then hopefully we'll be able to help a little bit with some of that money. So.
Yes, I just asked it to be ready if we don't get funding, so we have to be ready.
Yes, so as I said, the tickets will probably cost, it's hard to say exactly, but it will probably be 1,000, 300, 400, 500, depending on, it will be high season, so it may be on the higher end. And then the way we did it last time, as I said, the registration covered most of the expenses. It was housing, it was food. I think we had a couple of evenings when students were free to go and get, some fun together. So we didn't provide food on those days. And so if they have to buy it, I guess in Calgary, you would probably have to, I don't know, spend $8 or something like that for like a simpler meal. But most of the things otherwise were covered. And so I think it will be roughly the same in Canada.
And how long will be the symposium?
Last time we did 6 days, and many people stayed a little longer to, do some sightseeing. And we will see. I personally was arguing that maybe we'll do it a little shorter just to keep it cheaper, and then people can stay longer if they want to. But more likely than not, it probably will be 5 days of the actual program, plus you arrive on the day before, you leave the day after. So it will be more like 7 days in the country, the minimum. And then, as I said, it's a beautiful location. So they have wonderful mountains. They have a lot of stuff, interesting cultural stuff in the city itself. So if you wanted to see some of that, I suppose you can stay a little longer. So most students would probably stay a little longer just to go and explore some, do some sightseeing. So from that perspective, you can stay probably a little longer if you want to. Yeah. Would you prefer a little longer or a little shorter? What are your preferences?
Well, maybe longer to visit other places as well.
Yeah. Yeah, last time, as I said, we were not sure, so we went, it was 6 nights and basically 6 days, and then plus arrival and departure, so it almost becomes 7 or even 8. But as I said, some people, especially university students, some have summer jobs and had difficulties being away for so long. And then obviously the longer you make it, the more expensive it costs. And so some people said maybe we should make it a little shorter, the official program, but then people obviously can stay a little longer for the fun part. And so, as I said, it will be back to back with Calgary Stampede. It's a huge festival. They say like it's the biggest show on earth. Not sure how true it is, but it's definitely big. And it goes on for almost a week. And so we will make it back to back. And so I suppose some people will arrive a little earlier, have fun at the Stampede show, and then do some business. So we'll have to see how exactly we will plan it, but that would be a nice, good thing to visit and experience at least for a couple of days. So, all right, okay, well then, good to see you all again, and so I guess I'll see you next week, and have fun.